All right. Hey everybody. Just waiting for my friend and colleague, Dr. Ramanan, to join, and we'll be off. All right, here he comes. Hey, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, there we go. Yeah, we're good now.
Perfect, perfect. All ready to go?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So, hey, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. We have a really exciting show today with my good friend, brother, and colleague, Dr. Karthik Ramanan. If you saw this from the advertising, today's episode is all about a life without criticism and regret. And for those of you who don't know, I'm Dr. Jamil Sayegh. I'm a licensed naturopathic physician here in Arizona, and I coach leaders and high performers to eliminate regret. And for the past 14 years, it's been my passion, my mission, and my purpose to end suffering for as many people as I possibly can, while also waking people up to the reality of their own life, of who they really are, and then guide them to live an extraordinary life on their terms without regret. So that's what I'm all about. And I'd love to turn it over to you, my friend. Please tell everybody your story, who you are, and what you're all about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm Dr. Karthik Ramanan, also a naturopathic physician licensed in Arizona. My mission is I help ambitious individuals end self-criticism. And I do so really talking about the tools and strategies to create optimal everyday mental health. And what I mean by that is your relationship with yourself, your psychology, your relationship with others, so your romantic relationship, maybe your parents, siblings, other friends, your nutrition and fasting that goes along with that, sleep and exercise. So just really good everyday habits to create that, again, everyday mental health, that a conversation somewhere in between the spectrum of mental illness to the other end of this utopia of hanging out in Costa Rica all the time, which is this idealized sense of self-care and bliss that at least I'm not living that life.
That's next
But
weekend.
yeah, that's next week. Right, exactly. We're getting there. But yeah, so and ultimately the goal is my ultimate passion is just helping people get out of their own way so that they can execute on the things that they're passionate about and lead that life of purpose that I believe all of us are here for. And ultimately we get stuck in whatever job, relationship, things along those lines, living in a reflection of our past, and then we stop ourselves from being really the person that we're meant to be. So I just enjoy that aspect of helping people eliminate the self-criticism so they can get out of their own way and really execute on their passions.
Absolutely. I love that. And one of the things you said right in the beginning was you mentioned with health and fasting. I remember when I first really got to know you years ago, that was one of my first introductions to you. Could you give a little background about fasting and your experience with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So really it goes back to my 100-pound weight loss journey. And actually that's what sent me down this path, the path of naturopathic medicine to begin with. But what happened was, I've been overweight, really my whole life, and I had struggled with really being able to sustainably lose weight without plateauing and reversing. And ultimately, I got to a point where I was ready to give up on myself and just say, okay, this is just who I am now. And I saw my sister after a 3-month span, and she had lost a considerable amount of weight and her skin had cleared up. And I was like, what did you do? And I was just at this low point, of not the low point of my life, but it was one of the low points, right? Life is like this. It was one of those bottoms. And I said, okay, whatever you did, clearly it worked because you lost a bunch of weight. Your skin looks better than I've ever seen. All the cystic acne is gone, everything else. So she said, well, I've just been eating a raw vegan diet. I said, what's that? I just eat fresh fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds uncooked, just as they're found in nature. I do a little bit of fasting too. And I was like, oh my God, you were crazy. and I'm going to do that. So I did, and I just started, again, eating more whole plant foods, unprocessed, and ultimately got really interested in, getting a juicer, doing some juice only fasts, did some water fasts, and over the course of time, gradually stepping up, doing a little bit longer. Actually, earlier this year, I did an 18-day water fast, which was the longest I had done there. But you don't start there. Like, you don't start there. But probably when you met me, I might have been doing a 108-day juice fast or something like that.
That's what it was.
Some years ago. But anyway, yeah, that's really, it's one of those things that I enjoy doing because, and not on a regular basis. Like, I'll have one event, so to speak, per year maybe. But it's really in an effort to, obviously promote health, physical health, but from a mental side, there's a sense of utmost clarity that I get while fasting, that whether it's short or long term, obviously the longer the term, the more the clarity, but you can definitely achieve that in a shorter amount of time. And, just think about also the psychological break from going from constantly, figuring out what to eat, et cetera, to, hey, it's simple. We're just having green juice today. And that simplicity combined with obviously the cleaning of the GI tract plus the change in your gut flora really creates a sense of mental clarity that's unlike anything.
Yeah. Well, for everyone watching, clearly you can see that we have a very special person on the other side of this conversation. And when I first met him, it definitely stood out to me. And I really wanted to get to know you better and see what you were all about. And I know you have this deep passion about ending self-criticism. Can you talk more to that?
Yeah. So really, when I started to, obviously we go to naturopathic medical school, we get trained in a plethora of beautiful, amazing therapies. We can treat so many different conditions, especially the chronic ones. And I was really torn because on one hand, I had this weight loss journey. I'm very passionate about eating a lot more whole plant foods, right? And at the same time, there's the element of that, the element of fasting. But I was also, when I had the weight loss journey, what was really amazing was this mental transformation, this ability to see that my life was not limited to the walls that I had put up for myself, that, hey, I can have that body that I've always wanted. I can be more outgoing. I can be, and all these things. And I went from shy, overweight, ashamed of myself to this person that was really unlike anything that I had been in the past. At least it felt that way. And that transformation, and you talk about transformation a lot yourself, right? And that transformation was something that I was so passionate to talk to people about, because you don't have to live in your suffering. Like, you can become the person that you've wanted to be. I'm living proof of that. So I really enjoyed talking about that, but then there's also other elements of day-to-day life that we don't prioritize that are important, like sleep or exercise, and I was like, I could talk about all these things, and I really started to dive into, okay, what is the core issue that is similar, that weaves all of these things together in my life? And it was self-criticism. It was having to go through the process of life and the challenges to get to the point where I had to finally say, okay, I have to address this deeply held self-criticism if I'm ever going to be the person that I know I can be. And that's been a process that has extended well past that transformation years as well, even up until last year. And that was when I realized, okay, all those things that I talk about, those 5 pillars of everyday mental health that I mentioned earlier, to me are things that are difficult to execute on if you are self-critical. Yet those are the things that, along with a lot of other work, can help you eliminate that self-criticism. Again, what is that? Well, my purpose is to share that message. Your purpose is a little bit different. Our viewers, their life purpose is a little bit different. But ultimately, can you imagine if we could just stop that self-doubt and that, oh, you're not good enough, and all these things that we tell ourselves, that little yapping voice in our head? Imagine if we could just silence that and then go. What could you do? right? And
Yeah.
that's really what it's all about for me.
Yeah. So with your patients and with your clients, people you work with, what do you find to be the kind of the internal dialogue that's going on the most?
Not being enough in
Mm.
some capacity, whether it's smart enough, educated enough, good looking enough, lean enough, heavy enough. I've had that one too. I'm too skinny, right?
Yeah.
Uh, in some capacity, it's not enough. And all of those things root back to a childhood experience that
Usually,
then
yeah.
compounded upon, many other childhood experiences. And there's always some level, even if it didn't really manifest in childhood, there was at least a seed planted that, wait, could it be? I mean, you're usually in the teenage years, high school years, it can really manifest further, reinforce. And then we grow up to be adults and we just live this life on with this mental blueprint of who we think we are. And I would say that's really the most common one is feeling like we're not enough.
Yeah. And I see that as well with my clients and the people I've worked with in the past. Everyone seems to have, in one degree or another, in some area of their life, something where they feel that, as you said, not smart enough, not pretty enough, not good looking enough, whatever it is. And it holds them back, as you said, from the greatness that they can embody right now. I
Right.
know I gave this
Absolutely.
talk, talk earlier in the week, last week, and I got to this one slide where I talked about how in order to accomplish that goal that you have for your life, you must be that person who can already accomplish it. This
Yes.
idea that a goal is a place to come from, not a place to get to. And
You're
in a
right.
similar way, when you're
Right.
not in your mind doubting yourself, criticizing yourself, and not without realizing it, holding yourself back, limiting your potential because you're worried about the what if, you're worried about how you're looking, all these kind of things, and then you didn't realize you put a glass ceiling
Yeah,
on your
absolutely.
potential.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And really it goes back to imagine a triangle where at the top you've got belief, right? Belief that creates action, right? You take actions that are consistent with your belief. And then you've got every action has a result. So action yields result, and every result reinforces the belief. So you have this triangle of
Yeah.
belief turns to action, turns to result, result reinforces belief. So and this cycle goes on, and the more it goes on, it more reinforces that pattern. So people start taking actions unconsciously that are in line with that belief because we're not going to take actions that are inconsistent with who we believe we are.
Mhm.
And as a result, people fall into that trap that you just talked about. So how do you do that? How do you get out of it? Well, you don't take different actions. You can't create different results without different actions. What you have to do is adopt a new belief. It's that goal, that
Mhm.
goal. You have to start living into that person that you want to become. Just start doing the things that that person would do, thinking the way that person would think in small incremental steps. It doesn't happen overnight necessarily, at least the implementation of it. But over the course of time, you start to realize, oh my goodness, I never thought I could be who I am today. And that's why I think it's really important to be able to track where you are now versus, ultimately where you want to be. And so that you always have a way of reflecting on, hey, I really have come a long way. I am different. I am who I want to be.
Yeah. It's always so interesting that what you hit on, this idea that if you were to visualize the kind of person that you really want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, even, a month from now, a year from now, whatever it is, and I asked you, okay, what's that person like? Imagine I knew nothing and you're telling me that this person's confident. Well, I don't know what confident means. So like,
Yeah.
show me, demonstrate it. Like, I need to see what would that look like. And you would say, oh, it would look like this, this, and this. And you demonstrate it. And in that
Right.
moment, you're being confident.
Yeah.
And then you go back to being you now, and the
Exactly.
confidence seems to go away. And I say, well, what happened to that was just there? And you'll say,
Right.
oh, I was pretending. Like, they're not realizing there's a disconnect, that it's already
Yeah.
in you. All these emotional
Absolutely.
states, they're already there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another way of really looking at it is a framework that you actually introduced to me. And um, forgive me if I get this wrong, but it was
Yeah.
fundamentally the idea is we we can imagine the state of looking back at our younger self and saying, "Hey, I wish I could convey this information that I have now to my younger self. And what you introduced was what if your future self could tell your present self something? You know, what would your future self be grateful for that you did today? And, you know, if you can have a conversation with your younger self, well, why can't your future self have a conversation with you today? It's really the same thing. You're just time hopping in different directions. The reality is the mind doesn't necessarily know what's real and not real. We all know people that just seem very delusional about the facts and whatnot. Like, how did you get that conclusion from what happened? And, you know, but at the same time, like, why not use that to our advantage and say, okay, this is who I'm going to be in 5 years, and start doing those things like you just said that person in the future would do, and just have that conversation with the future self saying, hey, this is how it went for you. Talk about your future actions, future and present actions in the past tense, like you've already done them. You journal it that way. You meditate on it that way. And you'll be surprised that you really start to act in line with that vision of who you are. And all of a sudden, your self-criticism can't exist. It can't coexist with that. And you start to realize maybe that was just a tape that was playing in my head that wasn't real.
Yeah. And when you said belief, you know, being one of the big keys, it's really, think about it. Is there something that you do right now that's pretty much effortless, that 5 years ago, whatever it was in the past, it was a challenge, something you were afraid to do, you didn't want to try it? And what was the difference between you then and you now? Well, you then didn't want to make that move because you were afraid of what could happen. Right. Then you eventually did it, and you realized, oh, the fear was really the fear of the thought. It wasn't the fear of the actual thing.
Right.
So the belief got built up, but it always starts with that same thing. I'm going to try. I'm going to step into this. I'm going to do what it takes. And that's all we're asking people to do. Embody that version of you. Act as you would act. And all of a sudden, that future you becomes your present self.
Yeah. And honestly, that's been my life. Like, you asked me, you said, you know, what are you doing now that you wouldn't have done in the past? Well, this right now, to say, hey, we're going to have a conversation and it's going to be live. We can't edit it. There are people that are watching us right now. And I would say, maybe 7 years ago, I would have been absolutely mortified of this, because I was somebody that, I could put on a face and you'd never know. You'd never know from the outside what was going on in my head. But I didn't even want to open, like, when on the weekends, I go home, have my week at the office. I'd go home on Friday evening, and even if the trash was filled up in the kitchen, I would wrap it up, tie the strings on the bag, and leave it by the front door. The trash chute was right across the hall. Open one door, walk 3 steps, open the other door, trash chute. I didn't want to leave my apartment. I was that ashamed of myself. And if you told me that person would be who I am right now, having this conversation, I would have been like, I don't see that one happening. You're crazy, you know. But we can all change. We all can change. It's ultimately, this is what I believe. We change when it hurts enough.
Yeah.
We change when it hurts enough. And if you feel like you're really running into a wall, well, I hate to say it, but it doesn't hurt enough right now.
Yeah.
There's ways you can work around that. But ultimately, we change when we're forced to change. And those challenges that we face in life, as much as they suck in the moment, the reality is they are such a gift, because they allow us to push past those boundaries, that glass ceiling that we put on ourselves, like you talked about. And that's what allows us to start to break down the foundational beliefs that we have about ourselves to really become who we're meant to be.
When you mentioned that story with the garbage and the chute and feeling that shame, what do you feel was like the switch that got flipped that made that change from that person to you today?
Well, really, the switch was facilitated by weight loss. So when I was, 100 pounds overweight, again, I go to work, I do my job, I do an exceptional job, I got promoted very well, quickly and all those things, but I never let anybody into my personal life. I never let anybody into my head. And the switch happened when I started to get that physical feeling of, okay, now I have nutritious foods in my body, and I'm starting, I mean, forget the weight loss, but I'm starting to just feel better, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as that started to happen, I naturally found myself having more conversations with strangers, actually sensing that I was getting, eyes from women, something I wasn't used to. And all of these things that really gave me a little bit more confidence to say, hey, I don't know what's going on in my life right now, but I know that something special is happening and I'm just going to embrace it. So something special is happening. I'm on a ride. I'm just going to go with it. And before I knew it, it was just like, hey, all those things that I used to do and avoid, I just don't do them anymore. And part of that was living into the vision of my ideal future self.
I love this idea that if everyone watching, even though the main points of this conversation, it's criticism and regret, but notice how the thing that flipped the switch for Dr. Ramanan was food. It was nutrition.
Yeah, right.
It's like our health, every aspect of our health is interconnected. We are holistic beings. And oftentimes a lot of people only look at certain dimensions of it. And so I'm really happy you brought that up.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why when I talk about everyday mental health, one of the pillars is nutrition. Yes, you can, let's say you just go to therapy. Let's say you just do something really powerful like EMDR. It will have a magnificent impact on your life, hands down, right? Ultimately, I believe in order to sustain being that person that you're meant to be, you have to feed the body, you have to feed the mind, you have to feed your spirit with purpose. These are all things that we can't just address one thing or another. There's a collection of habits that work in symphony. You do one, the others become easier, right? So feeding the body is both in terms of the micronutrient intake, and it's also the sleep quality, it's also the exercise and that sort of thing. You can do just one or the other. All these, you can just do your psychology, you can just work on your relationships, but if you do it all together, your life just changes dramatically.
Yeah, that's what it's like. I know with me, my journey really started with, similar to yourself, it was nutrition. It was, being sick all the time and really just track performance and suffering and wanting to be able to perform, but also wanting to feel good, wanting to sleep well, have energy, all these different things. And I think just from my own clinical experience as a student and then as a physician, this idea that I had the worst diet of anyone I'd ever seen.
Right.
And so once I made those changes, all of the other things that I really love to focus on, as you said, the psychology, the relationships, the business, all this kind of stuff, that came after. But it really started with the nutrition of feeling good in my own body.
Yeah, no, it absolutely makes a giant difference. And the truth is that even if you don't fix anything else, if you start to just change the nutrition, and I don't mean just overhaul your whole diet, you can if you want, but just sometimes it's as simple as introducing a pure green vegetable juice into everything else that you're already having. Even if you're having sodas and donuts and all, introduce this. It might not taste so good at first, right? But you will find you start introducing it every day, a little bit at a time. You'll start to notice after 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I just genuinely feel better when I have this. I feel worse when I have my old stuff. And naturally it sells itself. You're saying, hey, I feel more energetic, more in tune, more clean physically. I'm not constipated anymore, all this stuff, right? And it just sells itself. So then you start to make that change, and then you realize, okay, now I'm physically feeling better. I actually feel like I want to go for a run. Then you do that, right? And then you go you start exercising, and like, man, I need to recover. Your sleep improves, and it compounds. So it's not like everything is one or the other, but you change one keystone habit, and the rest just flows.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be so hard. It really doesn't.
Yeah, I found that in my own experience as well. And when it's like meeting people where they're at, you know, not everybody's ready to just dive in fully and make 50 different changes. A lot of people get overwhelmed by that.
Yeah.
But when we
Yeah,
can
absolutely.
just meet them where they're at and say, okay, would this one thing, maybe two things, be doable? And they say, yeah. And all of a sudden, as you said, hey, doc, you know, I'm feeling a little better. I'm sleeping better. My energy's better. And then now there's room for more things to start entering their life, which is always beautiful.
Yeah,
I noticed.
Absolutely.
Anything you wanted to add there?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah. No, just so in regards to the self-criticism, I'd love to know. So let's say somebody comes to see you and they're really critical of themselves. What do you typically look for? What's the process you like to take them through? How do you deal with that from your experience?
Yeah, well, for me, I need to understand, this is just my approach. I need to understand the origin story. And whether somebody's self-critical or not, one of the things I'm, genuinely fascinated about is understanding what experiences made the person that's across from me right now. You know, for a person like you to be who you are, what did you have to go through to become who you are right now? So for the self-critical person, it usually reveals itself pretty quickly when I start to talk about their relationship with their parents, how it was growing up, and all of these things. And they may or may not feel like that affected them. Sometimes they'll say, yeah, I mean, that those things happened. But the truth is, when we're children, we even sometimes into the teenage years, we don't really have a perspective of what's normal and what's not. And it's just the way it was. Like, that's just reality. That's the world as I experience it. And we don't even realize that we're making some of those self-critical comments. So in the cases of the extremely self-critical ones, because some of them are self-critical, but they're willing to say, hey, I'm done living like this. Tell me what to do, I'll do it, right? So those people, we can walk them through a much more aggressive, so to speak, protocol where, you know, we'll do some exercises about how to change, again, relationship with self, habits that go along with that. Usually one of the first things I have them do is really start to notice the words that they use to speak and especially relate to themselves. Things they might blurt out like, you know, I'm such an idiot, you know, like, are you? Are you really an idiot? You're a, you know, an accomplished, ambitious business owner. Are you really an idiot? You just said that. What does that mean? Where does that come from? So I have them really look into those things. If there's a relationship that is causing that strain, let's say it's with a parent, we'll dive into, okay, well, what conversation, if possible, can you have with them today to say, hey, I've been making up in my head over the years that you've been terrible to me and this is who I've become because of it. But I've realized that, okay, maybe things weren't ideal years ago, but I'm living in this reality that I don't want to live in anymore. And starting to mend that relationship. It could also mean a first step of, okay, eat something micronutrient dense or a green juice or something like that, one thing a day. One tiny little habit that doesn't. So one of my clients, her job really was to start to notice the patterns of conversations that the language that she uses, and talking about her to herself in her mind and in the world around her. But also one of her goals was to see herself as somebody who follows through. So I said, okay, what's one thing that you want to do in some area of those 5 pillars that that matters to you? And she said, I'd like to exercise more. I said, okay, what does that look like? She said, well, I would love to just wake up and just do a bunch of push-ups and then sit-ups and then go for a run every day. I said, okay, cool. So here's your homework. Tomorrow, when you wake up and your feet hit the floor, you're going to get down on the floor and do one push-up.
Your hands hit the floor too.
Yeah. But one push-up. So why one push? Like, is one push-up going to move the needle? No, absolutely not. Yes, it will. Because the one push-up is so easy that you're not going to do it, right? It's like, I don't feel like doing it. All right, I'll just do one push-up to tick the box. But when you're already down there and you've already done one, hey, you know what? Maybe I'll do three, four. And she never only did one push-up, but that was the baseline, right?
Yeah.
And the more of those little things that you start to do differently, you start to see that, hey, I'm a person that prioritizes moving my body. I'm a person who prioritizes speaking to myself in a kinder tone. And all these things then start to accumulate to the reversal of self-criticism over time.
The part right there at the end that you hit on, I love telling people that movement creates momentum. And
Yes.
this idea that, as you said, if I think to myself, I need to do 50 push-ups, that'll be overwhelming. I drop down, I get to like 18, 20. If I'm feeling tired, I'll quit, and then whatever, it doesn't happen. But if it's, can you just do one? Well, it's like, yeah, of course I could do one, you know, and then you drop down, you do the one, and you've already started. And starting is usually the hardest part for most people. You've already broken through that. So now it's usually easier to continue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And another way you can do that is, even, you know, let's say you've got that gym membership that you're not doing. Maybe it's at least for me, a lot of the big challenge was, oh, if I go to the gym, it's going to take X number of minutes to drive there, and then I've got to work out for, let's say, an hour, and then I got to drive back, and before I know it, it's like this 2-hour affair end to end. I don't have time to do that. All right, I just skip the whole thing.
Yeah.
What if instead you say, all right, all I'm going to do today is I'm going to drive to the gym, I'm going to work out for 5 minutes, and then I'm going to drive back. It's like, okay, 5 minutes, drive back, that's like half an hour. 2 hours is too much. Half an hour I can handle, right? And you probably won't even break a sweat. So, you know, shower if you want, whatever. And so, but when you're there for 5 minutes, you're like, I might as well do a little bit more, you know? Maybe it only turns into a half-hour workout, but 5 minutes to a half hour is a big change. Now, is it less than your expectation of an hour? But what's the point of having a high expectation if you're never going to do it?
Yeah.
Create something small and actionable and doable. And not only, it has the double effect of, not only have you done something that is going to make you feel better, but on the flip side, on the other side of the scale, you have removed an opportunity for you to be self-critical. So that swing goes, you know, there's the magnitude of 0 to self-critical because I didn't go to the gym. And then there's the swing of 0 to the benefit of working out. It's two areas put together. It's a big swing to do. So it's really just a matter of creating momentum in your life. And like you said, you start with motion, but it can start with a lot of other things. And but momentum is so important because it's so hard to make these changes from a standstill. But you can start to make changes very simply if you just break it down to some impossible to not do action.
Yeah. And when it comes to self-criticism, it's so interesting because let's say you have this really high expectation for yourself that you don't hit on a consistent basis, you're going to be more critical because, you know, you're not doing it. But then if you make it like a bite-sized chunk, can I just do one, you know, something like that, even if you did just do one, you did it. And then and then if you set out to do one and you did 4, it's like, wow, I'm making progress. Yesterday I did 2, today I'm doing 4. You start feeling better about yourself. You can't tell yourself, well, I didn't work out, I didn't follow through, because you did. So it's going to start building that up.
Right. Absolutely. It's it really breaking it down into small, impossible to not do chunks makes all of this a whole lot easier. And, you know, I talk about removing self-criticism. You talk about helping people live a life without regret. Very similar in the sense of, you know, we're helping people think about themselves and see themselves in a different light. And it can seem daunting, but it doesn't have to be. The only thing you need is desire. The only thing you need is that desire to change. And usually that, again, like I said, that desire is driven by, it hurts too much right now. Like all the major changes that I made in my life in different areas, different times of my life in different chapters, were because I was in a place of so much pain that it was like, the pain of not taking action exceeds the pain of the fear of taking action.
Yeah.
So you take action.
there's a key distinction I give my clients. That one of them, there's many of them, but one of them is, it's not that you don't know how to, it's that you don't want to enough.
Yes.
And it's what you were
Exactly.
just sharing, this idea that if I'm your patient and I come to see you and I'm not happy with the way my life is, but again, it doesn't hurt bad enough, and I tell you, you know, my health isn't where I want it to be, my body isn't where I want it to be when it comes to like muscle and exercising, is it really that I don't know how to? Because if I wanted to, I could just Google it, and yeah, you're going to get different opinions, but I could get something probably more than I know right now. I can go on YouTube and find personal trainers making videos of how to do exercises with the right form. But why haven't I? Because it doesn't hurt bad enough yet, to your point.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, thank goodness we live in an age where finding information is not hard anymore. Granted, there's a lot of misinformation too.
Yeah.
But, you know, at least, I don't know, there's pros and cons to that. But it's not a matter of knowledge either way. It's a matter of desire and will. And, you know, it's an interesting conversation when, you know, with permission and a loving heart, you tell a patient or a client, you don't want it enough. Like, that's the reason why you're not changing. By contrast, right? I had a patient who was type 2 diabetic, and she was pretty severely diabetic. I think her A1C was close to 9, and but she got to this age where that was the age that her mother had died years ago, and her husband's health was failing, and she just realized, like, no more. I have to. And this patient, you know, ate the plant-based diet that we recommended, logged everything that she ate, took her blood sugar every day, and on the rare occasion that she didn't eat, or she like ate one thing that was off the plan, and it was simply, you know, because let's say it was her husband's birthday and they were celebrating, she would highlight it for me. It wasn't even like hide it. She would like show me, okay, this was a day that I cheated. Like, you know, you didn't cheat. You just had something. It's fine. You know, lived. But you just lived. Yeah, exactly. But she would highlight, like, she was so committed. She never missed a day. And, you know, I think it was less than 6 months, but in 6 months we confirmed, because we took her A1C every 3 months. But in 6 months, we confirmed she was no longer diabetic. She continued to see me for, I think, a little over a year, just to continue that lifestyle, you know, accountability and whatnot. But she never missed logging anything, right? By contrast, I had another patient, same thing, right? Didn't do anything from the initial, you know, treatment plan. Came back, and it's like, okay, 1 month later, so what's changed? Nothing. Okay, we had a conversation about that, and they never came back. What's the difference? Same diagnosis, same treatment plan, same doctor, right? Yeah. One person wanted it, the other one didn't. It's that simple.
Yeah. And from your experience,
and it's not one thing I would just want to clarify. It's not a judgment thing, because I, of all people, have been in that place where I'm so deeply committed to my self-pity and not wanting to change that even up like a year ago, I was not in a good place, because I was really committed to, okay, all these things in my life have changed, but there's some really deeply rooted self-criticism that I didn't want to let go of, right? And that was starting to manifest in these terrible ways. And I'm like, I have to fix this before I got married in December of last year. And that was my motivation. But ultimately, when I started doing EMDR, the first appointment, I was so scared because I was afraid it was going to work.
Yeah.
Think about that. I was so afraid it was going to work. So yeah, up until that point, I didn't want it bad enough. So it's not a judgment thing. It's just, we're not in that place in our lives. So I see my role now as, hey, just help as much as you can, and when you are ready, I will still be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing all that.
Oh, you're welcome, of course.
And so when we look at self-criticism, and then there's the second half of, you know, what we said we talk about today, is the idea of regret. Where does that
Yeah.
come in for you?
Yeah, regret. So this transformed version of myself. Actually, one second before we get into that, I think Tim just asked what's EMDR. It's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a form of psychotherapy that is incredibly powerful. So you can look that up, and if you're interested in finding a psychotherapist that's certified in EMDR, it's definitely worth it. So there's one thing I'm afraid of at this point. I mean, in addition to, physical threats and that sort of thing, and whatever. But
Bears.
yeah. But the thing that I'm scared of more than anything is waking up one day at 92 years old and looking back at my life and saying, look, all those things that I could have done, all those people that I could have served, all this meaning in life that I could have had, those rich relationships, I just squandered it. I squandered this opportunity at life. That regret scares me to death. So I use this framework of, okay, what would my future older version of myself say to this present? Like, because you and I think you'll agree, it's not that we don't have fears. It's not that we don't get resistance and run into trouble. We developed a mechanism to act in spite of.
That's what we're more afraid of.
Yeah, right, exactly. So so that's where regret comes in, is how do I live my life right now so that I don't become 92 and regret this, all the years of life that I had.
Yeah. I know, to share a little bit of my experience, for me, when I was 19 years old, my father had a brain aneurysm. And for anyone who doesn't know what that is, just imagine one of the blood vessels in your brain starts to balloon out. So you have this tube, and then you have this kind of balloon coming out. And then if you're lucky, you have a bad headache, you go get it checked on, and they take care of it, and you're good to go within a couple of days or a week. My dad wasn't one of those lucky few, and his ruptured, it bursted. So that balloon's popping now. And he was on a 4-hour brain surgery. He came as close to dying as you basically can. And after the surgery, he survived, which was completely miraculous. But there he was in a coma, and I didn't know if he was ever going to wake up. And I'm 19 years old, and I'm staring at him. And I remember just feeling this combination of helplessness, because it looks like a train hit the guy. And like, I want to do something, but there's nothing to do, coupled with this immense feeling of regret that I'd never felt before. This feeling of, I didn't have the kind of relationship with my dad that I knew I could have, because I convinced myself of this idea that I have time. My dad was 49 when he had his aneurysm, and I'm 19, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, 70, 80, 90 years, 100 years maybe. Probably not with the genetics, but but the idea that I thought I had time, and that's what so many people, we convince ourselves of that. And it's like this idea that we all know intellectually that, that we're going to die, that everyone, does die, but we try as hard as we can not to think about it because it's uncomfortable. So this thing was, there I am, 19, in the room with my dad, and telling myself, like, I messed up. He's very likely going to pass, and I missed my chance to have this deep connection with my father. But then over the course of 3 years, he made almost a full recovery. And every day, I wasn't sure. I went to bed at night wondering, is this the last time I'm going to see my dad when I say goodnight to him? Am I going to wake up and he's not there? And I'd wake up in the morning with this idea of, was that all a dream? And so there would be this dynamic. It's like there's like heaven where I'm seeing the miracle of it, and then there's hell where it's like there's a lot of emotional pain and suffering. But every day I woke up and he was there. It was another gift. It was another new day of life. And after 3 years, he passed away, and I had this wake-up call over the course of those 3 years that culminated in the day he passed, where I recognized that not only am I going to start appreciating the people that are in my life, the things that are in my life, the opportunities that I have while I have them, because we never know, what's going to happen. I have multiple family members who passed away in their early 20s. And, you know, they
Mm.
thought they were living to 80, 90, 100 years old too when they were 17. And so
Right.
this idea that what do you really want to do that you have been putting off and you've been procrastinating on in your life because you think you have time? And if I ask you sincerely, how much time do you have left? The fact that you don't know the answer to that should
Yeah.
be enough motivation for you right there. And so my experience with my father really shaped me in, you know, as many ways as possible. And there I was at his wake, open casket, and over 7,000 people came to a 5-hour
Wow.
wake. And
Wow.
almost everyone shook my dad's hand. He was a family practice doctor and a musician. And they shook my hand and they said, "Your dad saved my life." Almost everybody. And
Wow.
I didn't move from that casket for 5 hours. And the repeating message that I kept getting was how big of an impact this guy made in his 49 years before his aneurysm. And then I looked at myself, and at the time, I was definitely a shy guy. I was a shy guy. And growing up, I was always shy. You know, I love to sing, I love to be goofy and perform and do all these things. But the moment somebody's watching, I would shut down. And this
Right.
idea of not wanting to shine, you know, my light. And I noticed that in so many different people. And I made a commitment on that day that I would no longer play small because I had been playing so small. And I wasn't going to basically rob the world, let's say, of my gifts, just like anyone watching is doing if they're holding back what they have to offer. Because what I went through with my father and what that taught me, and it's been about 10 years since then, it's like what I've been able to accomplish since then, the people I've been able to impact, it's all because I made that decision to step up. And every one of us, no matter what we do as a profession, as a hobby, as a lover, as a friend, whatever it is, there's such an impact we can make. And to your point about, you know, looking back at your life in the future, I always like to think of it in the same way. If I'm 90 years old looking back at my life, am I going to be asking for a do-over? Or am I going to sit there and say, I wouldn't change a thing? That to me is what it's all about. And this is the thing, you know, I love looking into, you know, all of this idea of like the regrets of the dying. And there was a paper published on this about like there's like 5 that were like averaged, but just to give you a few more of them, the number 1 regret is I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life expected of me by others.
Right. Yeah.
And when I made the decision to go to medical school, when I made the decision to go full into my coaching career, there was definitely some slack that I got, but it was because other people didn't understand it the way that I was pursuing it. And from their perspective, coming from a place of love, wanting to look out for me and stuff like that, oh, you know, you shouldn't do that. These are all the reasons why. But if I listened to that, that would have been a deep source of regret. So it's like being authentic to ourselves. Another one is really sharing how we feel with the people that we love. Another one is not working as much, choosing to be happier. A lot of people think happiness is something that happens to them. When I get this, when I get that, then I'll be happy. Those are the people that accomplish all these things. I know we both work with a lot of high performers. It's like people who accomplish all these things and they're still miserable. Because again, just like with a goal, happiness is a place to come from, not to get to. And so when somebody can sit there and say, I chose to be happy based on controlling my focus. And, you know, there's so many other of these regrets, but as a little exercise for anybody watching, get a piece of paper. And I want you to imagine that you're 100 years old looking back at your life and you lived a life that you do have a lot of regrets. What would those regrets be? And you list them all out and you'll find that, let's say you're watching this now and you're way younger than that 100-year-old self. And you're aware of those regrets in your 20s and your 40s and your 60s, however old you are right now, you can start changing your behavior right now so you don't have those regrets immediately just from flipping that switch.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a great framework to look at because, and I love how you said that happiness is not a destination. It's really a place that you come from. And, you know, like I said, I like to help ambitious individuals and self-criticism. And when you're ambitious, what does that mean? Like, well, for some people, it's about achievements, and it's like Either you're want to achieve the next promotion, or bump in salary or income, net worth. It could be a whole bunch of different things. But I think anyone who's gotten there will say, yes, it will afford you, whatever level of success will afford you to be able to do something that maybe you weren't able to do before. However, happiness isn't associated with it.
Mm-hmm.
It can be. You could choose to be happy, but then if you choose to be happy, you could choose to be happy without that achievement too. It's That's really that joy of the process, and the process of growth. And it's one of the things I talk about as well. It's if you can find happiness in just the very aspect that you are living your life to the best of your ability right now, and that you're just 1% better tomorrow than you are today, 1% better today than you were yesterday. If you get 1% better at anything every single day, at the end of a year, you're 37 times better. Yeah. It seems like insignificant, but finding joy and happiness in growth is so much more fulfilling than trying to find happiness in achievement.
Yeah. And there's this distinction between happiness and pleasure. And this idea that somebody might say, okay, when I got that promotion, when I got the new job, when the money came in, whatever it was, it made them happy, and it was momentary, and then it faded. It
was pleasure. Yeah.
In my mind, at least, it wasn't happiness. It was pleasure. Yeah. And that pleasure, it is a place to get to. You can create it to a certain degree with like visualizations and stuff like that. But in general, it is a place to get to. But that happiness, which is more of the long-lasting feeling that people in general are seeking, that's that place to come from. Absolutely. I wanted to share this idea that self-awareness is so important in order to avoid a life of regret. Because in order for you to, think about it, what does a life of regret mean? A life of regret, in the generalist, most basic of terms, there was a bunch of things that I could have done, that I wanted to do, that I didn't for whatever the reason was. And now I'm looking back and I feel bad about it. Like, that's kind of it.
Right.
And then from that perspective, looking at your life right now, you figure out, one, what it is that I'm using the pinky for number one. It's interesting. It's like, what it is that you want. Get really clear. And then it's like, all right, why do you want that? Why does it really matter? So I know in my situation, as you said, when it hurts bad enough, when you want it strong enough, that's what's going to drive you forward. So the why matters. So you figure out what you want, you figure out why you want it, then you figure out, all right, what's the how? What's the process look like? What do I have to do? What are the steps? And then finally, one of the most important things is the who. Who do I need to be right now in order to get to that goal? Because I don't have what I want yet, because I am not yet the person who can create it. Otherwise, I'd already have it. That's right. And so there's this idea that, okay, this is what I want. I don't have it yet. There's reasons. One of them being I'm not taking the right action. But another one being I'm not being that person. I'm not coming from that place. Just like, this distinction between rich and poor. And a lot of people think it has to do with money, and it doesn't. Rich and poor are mindsets, which is why you can have a billionaire who goes bankrupt and loses it all. They're still rich, but they're broke. Broke financially, but they're rich in their mindset, which is why they typically get it back. But you give somebody who is, let's say, a poverty mentality, and let's say in the middle class or below in terms of income, and then they win the lottery and they get $200 million, and 3 years go by, and statistically they lost it all, because even though they had money financially, of like financial abundance, let's say, they still thought with a poverty mentality, and a poverty mentality can't sustain that wealth. That's kind of this idea of coming from. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And being able to see that. And the interesting thing is this, right? You win the lot. It's almost like, what do you have to do to succeed if you win the lottery, right? It's because you can have that mindset right now, whether or not you win the lottery. But when you develop that rich mindset, or any of these other empowering mindsets, these sustainable, fulfilling, regret-free mindsets, and you start living into that, you're not only able to create more through your own creativity, your own efforts, but you're also more receptive to recognizing okay, these things happened. This happened in my life unexpectedly. But because of my mindset, I can see the opportunity in it and I can seize that. And I actually think that one of the greatest skills we can develop is we all want to have control over our life. You know, we all want to have this, I want life to be, want it to go my way, and I want these things to happen. We, you know, and then 5 years from now, I'm going to do this, and 10 years, I'm going to have that job, and, you know, and all these things. But the reality is, when has your life ever gone according to plan? Ever, in the grand scheme of things, right? Like you were saying earlier, like we don't know how much longer we're going to live. We have no idea how things are going to play out. So the best thing that we can do is learn how to adapt to the way things are and really use those circumstances to our benefit so that we can really take who we are, take those circumstances, and then put them together and create the best possible outcome. That's a skill. That's a mindset. That's something everybody can do. It doesn't require money, nothing.
Yeah, it's this idea that in its most basic form, we cannot control what happens to a large degree, but we can always control how we respond to it. That internal environment is completely within your control. You're presented with situations and circumstances. What are you going to do with it? You mentioned earlier in the conversation, this kind of, when it comes to self-criticism, some people get lost in their story. They start pitying themselves and they fall into this loop. That is not, to the best of their ability, utilizing their ability internally to control what they can control, you know?
Yeah.
There are two things I wanted to share just to give people just value that you can begin applying immediately. If you're in a situation, fork in the road, and you can go either way, and you think to yourself, I'm not sure what I want to, I know I want to do this, but I'm afraid for all these reasons, so I'm probably going to go the other way. Future pace it, imagine yourself 90 years old, and ask yourself the question, as you look back at your life and reminisce, what would I have wished I'd done, like back then? You know, and from that place, really think about it. And all of a sudden, you start to see that, all right, you know, in the moment when I made that decision that I regret now, I didn't follow my heart for all these reasons. I was afraid of getting judged, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You know, now at 90, I realize that I let myself down. Like now at 90, I realize my life could have been so much more beautiful. It could have went in a completely different direction. And from that place, you come back to this moment and you're way more likely to follow your heart and do the thing that you do want to do. You know, there's this client that I had, I love this story, this idea that he was afraid to approach this woman that he really liked, and he had a lot of approach anxiety. And there's this idea that the what if, you know, I'm afraid because what if it doesn't work? What if she says no? What if this happens? What if that happens? All these different, you know, scenarios that we imagine. And so we make it up in our head, the what if, then we act as if it's true before we've even done it or approached.
Right. Yeah.
And then because of that, you know, we don't end up approaching, and there's like this self-fulfilling prophecy, excuse me. But there's this idea that what if it does work out versus what if it doesn't? And a lot of people typically jump straight to the what if it, you know, goes wrong. And so with this person, there he is, you know, 24, 25 years old, and he's looking at this woman several times, and they work together, and he's like, he tells me, I really like her, I want to talk to her, but, you know, I'm nervous. And I got him to visualize, imagine you approached her, you were nervous out of your mind, palms are sweating, knees weak, mom spaghetti, and all that. But this idea that you're nervous.
On a sweater already.
Sorry,
continue.
But you're nervous, and then you walk up anyway. And, you know, you start a conversation, and even though you were nervous, you know, it went well. And then you go on that first date, and it was really fantastic, and you're interested in the person. You want to learn more. You're attracted to the person. And then you keep fast 6 months, a year, and then a lifetime. And imagining all these adventures, like this perfect life that you could live with this person. And now imagine being a 90, 95 years old in the rocking chair, both of you holding hands. And you look at this person and you say, you know what's interesting, what's funny? And they go, what's that? And you say, when I first, you know, asked you out, I almost didn't approach you because I was so afraid that you were going to say no, or that you had a boyfriend, you had a girlfriend, or whatever it is,
Right.
or that you were married. And I'm so happy that I did. And then I have that person come back to the present because now they've seen a potential future. And I tell them, is the possibility that that could be real versus the chance that they might say no.
Yeah.
And they're like, and then he literally the next day walks over to her, speaks to her. It's been years. They're married now.
Oh, that's amazing.
And it's
so
like,
great.
it worked out perfectly. But the thing is, he's so happy right now, and that might not have happened. And so I'd love to hear anything you have to say about that.
Ah, that's amazing. It's true because, you know, we're wired to look for risk. We're wired to look for the downside. Our brain is designed to protect us. So there's nothing wrong with you that you act that way. And that's something I emphasize, especially the self-critical among us. It's so easy to say, oh, I wish I could just be daring and brave like ever. No, you're wired this way for a reason. But that doesn't mean that you have to live according to that wiring. If you learn to act in spite of your fear, you'll have an extraordinary life. Just think of all the ways. And it's just such a beautiful way of, you know, again, visualizing the upside to say, okay, can you imagine that feeling of being in the rocking chair, telling that story to your significant other? And imagine if, now that that's happened, imagine if that never happened because you never took the one chance when you were 25.
Yeah.
You know, and it really puts the whole thing into perspective. And, you know, I could say the same thing about with me and my wife. Like I was really scared. We were different backgrounds. Like I didn't see, you know, religious backgrounds. I didn't see how it could work in the beginning, but I had this undeniable feeling that she just gets me. I trust her on a level that I've never trusted anybody before. She's an incredible human being, but how could it work? We're not from the same, you know, she's comes from a very, you know, a very strong Christian family. I come from a very strong Hindu family. How could it work?
But it did.
We made it work. We made it work. It was scary, you know, to have the conversations with the parents and whatnot in the beginning, but now everyone's happy. And everyone who knows us knows, like, yeah, this was meant to be. So yeah, it's one of those things, and I think about that. Like, had I said no, we can't go further with this dating, which I did actually, and then you know, as more embarrassing moments, I suppose. But I said no, we can't do this. It's not going to work. And totally broke her heart. And then the next day, actually not even the next day, really the next minute, I was like, you know what? No, I take that back. Please forgive me.
I didn't mean it.
No, we'll figure it out. We'll make it work. I'm so glad because, like, again, regret is more terrifying than you know, asking that question and finding out. Because let's say it doesn't work out. That person, let's say that he asked that woman and she said, oh, I'm in a relationship. Okay. That it might hurt for a little while and then you'll get over it like you always do. And in fact, it didn't end poorly. It just didn't start.
Yeah.
But isn't that better than missing out on what could have been?
Yeah. And when you throw in the self-criticism component, you tried, you attempted, you put the effort in. And even though it didn't work out, that's something to celebrate because you put yourself out there. You know? Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's another thing that I try to drive home with people, that it's when you're self-critical, it's very easy to look at negative outcomes and say, yeah, see, because I'm just not capable. I'm not enough. That's why that happened. No, those things can happen to anybody, but the truly self-critical person is not even going to take action. I know because I've been there.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that you took action and you took a chance is the win.
Yeah.
The outcome you can't control, but you can control the action. And taking the action, that's the win. Yeah. That's something that deeply held self-criticism is not going to allow you to do. So you move past that. Good on you. I honor that.
Yeah. I know one of my mentors, he's a businessman, Mark Cuban, billionaire business guy. And he talks about all you can control is effort. And that's what you
Right.
were just saying,
100%
how
true.
bad do you want it? How much are you putting into it? And you mentioned this idea in the beginning of this conversation, this wearing a mask that, I could, or in this case, you could put a front up that you were happy or you were feeling a certain way and nobody would know. And to
Right.
that, like, I have a question to ask to everybody watching. When it comes to regret, a life of regret, think about this. Do you want to be happy or do you want to be perceived as happy? This idea that, are you actually happy with your life, or does everyone around you think that you're happy, but you're miserable? And if that's what's going on, again, there's nothing quote unquote wrong with it because it's just a choice. But it's, is that a choice you want to keep making? And please understand that you have the power. Every moment is a second chance. Every moment you can decide to do something different. And so, as what we said, self-awareness was key. When you're aware of it, now you can do something about it.
100% true. 100% true.
Yeah. And so, is there anything you'd like to say in closing, my friend?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say if I could leave something of value here, if you do deal with deeply held self-criticism, and by that I mean there's a difference between saying I did something wrong. Let's say I did something that resulted in failing out of medical school or failing out of college or whatever. I did something wrong, or I did something below my expectations. There's a difference between that and I am wrong. There's something wrong with me. I am broken. I am not enough. I am incapable. I'm not powerful, right? I don't belong. All of these things are self-criticism. They're a statement of who you are, not how you act or the outcomes of your actions. If you deal with that, I have found that the most powerful thing from a day-to-day basis is to create a morning and evening routine that basically encompasses foreshadowing your day on one end, and at the end of the day, looking back and saying, I am proud of myself because I did this one thing today. It could be the tiniest thing. It doesn't matter what it is, but you do one thing every day that makes yourself proud. And it was something that I had been really wanting a framework for it, because we hear about it, the power of journaling, especially in various areas of mental health and even performance, and journaling is something I hated because it's open-ended. I'm a very analytical guy, like follow the steps, and to have that divergent thinking, like I enjoy trying every so often, but as a daily practice it was really difficult. And ultimately what I ended up doing is I figured, okay, these are the important things that I want to have in my morning routine, so that I can say, okay, I'm specifically grateful for this. These are my goals. If things go off course today, this is my plan. This is what I will do to bring myself back onto course. And at the end of the day, again, what did I do that made me proud, and where can I improve? And just also tracking those elements of everyday mental health, like the nutrition, the sleep, and the exercise. So what I decided to do is I put that together as a single page journal entry. It was really made for myself. And then a few people started asking for it, so I made that available. So and I think it's a really powerful way to start creating some accountability, but also making sure that you're taking actions consistent with the person that you're meant to be, and having that framework. And it's really simple one-page journal. So if you want that, you can download it for free at drkjournal.com, drkjournal.com. And I'd love to know what you think if you try it out and see how it works for you. I'd love to have your feedback and see. I'm always open to any conversation here. So then you can find me here through this account. You can send me a friend request. I have a page here on Facebook as well. And I'm also Dr. Karthik Ramanan on Instagram, and Dr. Karthik Ramanan on YouTube. So hope to find some of you there. Would love to have a conversation about how self-criticism is affecting your life, and how you can, what you feel like you need in order to take yourself out of your own way to become the person that you're meant to be.
Absolutely. I love the idea that you said of not identifying. So many people, they adopt let's say, I am a procrastinator. I am, lousy. I'm whatever their word is, rather than I have a habit of doing this.
Right.
I've conditioned myself to be like that. I have a pattern of doing these things. Now it's not you. It's not I am depressed. It's I have depressing thoughts, that I'm choosing to focus on. Like there's a difference there. And so I really think that's a powerful thing to get people. Just don't identify, see it for what it is. It's a thought. And when you see it as that thought, it isn't you, because you're the one having the thought.
Right.
And there's that big distinction.
Absolutely true.
But this has been such an honor, my friend. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah.
And again, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jamil. It's been fun. And by the way, in a couple weeks, date has been picked, but it's not off the top of my head right now. But Dr. Jamil will be on my YouTube channel, and we're going to continue this conversation and talk a little bit more about regret in a little bit more depth. But I'm really excited to have this conversation continue in a couple weeks on YouTube.
As am I, my friend. Wish you the best and hope you have an amazing rest of your week, okay?
All right, you too.
Take care, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Bye-bye.
Bye.